Hello, a warm welcome to this week's World, the last in our series. We dedicate this programme to a look at America, its divisions, its power and its future at such a politically turbulent moment. After 8 years of Barack Obama, has his cautious approach to military intervention made the world any safer? We speak to his former Defence Secretary, Chuck Hagel. And why do racial tensions in the country appear to be on the rise? We ask white Americans if they've noticed things reaching boiling point. Could it swing the election? I'll speak to the woman Donald Trump has tipped as his potential vice president. Plus, a novel way to stop violent criminals. Pay them to stop committing crime. But first, here's the news you might have missed this week in a bite-sized chunk. Is this the week it all became about love and hate? New stats show that LGBT people are more likely to be targeted by hate crime than any other group in America. In the wake of the Orlando massacre, though, here's how people have been reacting, showing affection online. And here's what Internet Vigilantes Anonymous did to ISIS Twitter accounts. But in the UK, another senseless murder. Labour MP Jo Cox was gunned down outside her constituency office. Known for her tireless work on Syria, Cox supported intervention in the country's bloody civil war on humanitarian grounds. Greater intervention's a view shared by 51 US diplomats who signed a memo urging President Obama to sanction airstrikes against the Assad regime. More on that later. Oh, and Decision Day looms in the EU referendum. Before campaigning was suspended as a mark of respect, referendum fever had reached a farcical crescendo at the so-called Battle of the Thames.
You are no fisherman's friend!
Perhaps this farmer has the right idea. Forget the polls, watch the pigs. Our panel today is Mina Al-Arabi, a journalist specialising in the Middle East, and the documentary maker Mobeen Azhar. It's lovely to have you both here. Thanks for coming in. I'm just back from Orlando. You're starting us off with that's really been the story of the week.
Yeah, awful story. But I think as the week has gone on, we found out more and more information about who Umar Mateen was, who the perpetrator was.
Of the killer of...
The killer, yeah. And we started off with this perspective that he was supporting ISIS and he did this in the name of global Islamic jihad or whatever you might want to call it. As the week has gone on, we found out he was most likely that he was gay. Lots of people have come forward and said that he was using these gay dating apps. So he was extremely closeted. His ex-wife came forward and said that he used to beat her up, that he used to drink a lot, and that he wasn't particularly Muslim. We also know he used to be a loner and he used to frequently go to the Pulse nightclub. So he's a man that had a lot of self-loathing and a lot of issues. I think what this really tells us is about the character of a lot of these people, and we see these themes again and again. If you were to be really cruel about it, you could say he has the character of a loser. You know, quite often, I think, we paint these people as kind of criminal, terrorist masterminds. But actually, what there are people with huge personal issues. ISIS then came out and said, yes, this guy, Umar, is a soldier of the caliphate. Now, you know, I wonder if a week on, knowing that he was actually a closeted gay man, if they distanced themselves from that.
He becomes less attractive to ISIS.
He becomes less attractive, but also, you know, let's look at the facts of the case. This is a man as well who pledges allegiance not only to ISIS, but to Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda too, organisations that are rivals.
Mina, take us to your hotel review of the week. This is an odd one.
This is really an odd one. So this is a hotel review by a UN official that frequents Damascus in trying to solve the conflict that's been ongoing there for over 5 years. And he's actually put a review on TripAdvisor of the Four Seasons, which is the swankiest hotel in Damascus, but it's also the safest, and that's why they use it. And so he's put it that it's a lovely hotel, and the staff try to do what they can, but we're low on supplies. They're low on a few supplies. Now, the irony of that happening when Ghouta, which is only a few kilometers away from Damascus, is literally dying of starvation because they've been under siege for over 4 years now. But it's really the contrast of what the UN is doing inside of Syria.
It feels crass, doesn't it?
It feels very crass and, yeah, detached from the suffering of people who are there.
Mobeen, take us to your crime wave of the week.
This is a real issue for any avocado lovers out there. New Zealand this year has had a particularly terrible crop of avocados, which means the price of avocados has gone through the roof. So what do we have? An avocado crime wave. We've had 40 crops of avocados being stolen en masse and then being sold on the black market. The police have put out a statement as well saying these avocados could be dangerous. Yeah, dangerous.
This is terrible news for hipsters worldwide.
Absolutely. Anyone that loves avocados is in mourning at the moment.
But what's the black market? Like, where do you get it?
So you get them on the roadside, I imagine, or maybe you have an avocado dealer that you give a call to and they come and drop them off. Yeah, or you meet them in a car park somewhere. I don't know.
Mina, take us to your anthem of the week. This is changing the tune, or changing the words anyway, in Canada.
Indeed, yes. So O Canada, Canada's national anthem, is going to get revamped if the parliamentarians get their way. So they've asked to change the anthem from a phrase within the anthem that says, all thy sons, to be all of us. So instead of just talking about sons, rather the daughters and everybody who wants to be gender neutral in Canada gets included in the anthem.
They tried this before, didn't they?
They did. They tried this in 2010, but the Conservatives were leading then and it got knocked down. Now, Liberals, Justin Trudeau era, it passed through the lower house and it's yet to be seen if the Senate will pass it, but it looks quite likely.
Thank you both. Now, when Barack Obama was elected nearly 8 long years ago, many hoped he'd be a unifying figure over the deep divisions of race that have riven the country for so long. Yet, take a long, hard look. From Ferguson to Baltimore to the massacre in a Charleston church, racial tension appears to be on the rise. And that's even before you throw in the Trump factor. On This Week's World, we wanted to ask white people of their assessment of why race had become inflamed. Clive Myrie went to Milwaukee.
It seems bizarre to have to ask the question, does America have a race problem? All the evidence says yes. But not everyone in the US agrees. Surveys consistently show that while most black people believe race is an issue, most white people don't. A divergence of opinion that existed even at the height of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Most white people didn't understand what Martin Luther King was trying to do. So, I'm going on a journey into the mind of white America. It could be a bumpy ride, according to Talk Radio.
The value in black life, given the illegitimacy rate, out-of-wedlock rate, is far higher than that of the rest of the society. The reason that people have children before they marry is values, not poverty.
Blacks are stupid. That is correct. They are blinded by anger at whites.
You don't need to say white lives matter, because white people don't walk up to white people, put a gun to their head and blow them away.
I didn't want to talk to any African Americans for this film. Discrimination is obviously a black issue, but when you think about it, it's mainly a white problem. So I set my own color bar.
Bam, 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 bam. And you know it's coming from those areas. And then the next day the news will come on, and sure enough, there was a shooting of some young black man.
I'm part of the problem. Because I don't know how to solve the problem, and so what do? I ignore it.
After a while, the race card has been played so much that it has lost its value.
If you think racism doesn't exist, you're white.
Welcome to white, affluent Milwaukee, home to some of the most expensive real estate in America, all groomed lawns and tended yards. But just a few minutes' drive away are pockets of despair. This is Black Milwaukee, home to 70% of African Americans living in the state of Wisconsin. It's poor, run down, undesirable. Professor Mark Levine from the University of Wisconsin gave me a tour and explained how over several decades, mortgage lenders and estate agents steered different races to different parts of the city.
You know, they could sort of deny outright racism by simply saying, well, this is just a hard-boiled economic analysis. We know that African Americans are a greater credit risk and they're not going to, pay back these loans, and so we're not going to make those loans. A study was done about a decade ago by the city to look at exactly that issue, and they found that a white household with income around $25,000 a year had about the same rejection rate for housing loans as a black family with income over $125,000 a year.
And the result of racism in mortgage lending is segregation. And that in turn fuels poverty as investors turn their backs on black areas. Meanwhile, in white Milwaukee,
People who don't even live in the neighborhood tend to walk through here because it's pleasant on the eyes and it's a comfortable place to be. It's safe. But on the other hand, just up a couple of blocks, I can, especially through the summer, hear gunshots, bam, 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 bam.
So if I was to ask you then, what is your view of those African Americans living in that area? What would that be based on? Because it's not on personal contact,
right.
is it?
Honestly, most of it is based on what I see on the news, which unfortunately is a lot of negative.
What I'm saying is I'm part of the problem. Because I don't know how to solve the problem, and so what do? I ignore it.
Do you think a lot of people do that?
Yeah, sure.
These Americans enjoy a privilege. They can avoid the unpalatable. They live comfortable lives in nice areas because they're white. And the advantages white people enjoy, the privileges they have, are endless.
Good morning, Wisconsin. You're listening to News Radio 620 WTMJ. I'm Charlie Sykes.
This is one of the most important men in right-wing talk radio in Wisconsin. Charlie Sykes has a legion of listeners, and most are white, suburban, and Republican. Do you think many of your listeners understand the concept of white privilege? Have they come across that idea?
I think they've heard the term. I don't think they fully grasp it. I'm not sure that I fully grasp it. I actually had a caller the other day who asked me about that, and I asked him to try to define it.
And the caller did a pretty good job.
Well, I've noticed that I have a few African-American friends. One of my good friends, he's been pulled over at least 15 times, and I have never been pulled over before.
Okay, so that you think that is your white privilege? Maybe it's because, I don't know, just a theory here, you don't speed, you don't violate traffic laws. Is that possible?
He doesn't do any of those things.
All right. One of the things that we're seeing in American politics is you have a lot of white, working-class, poor people who do not feel that they are privileged because of their race.
So, as far as you're concerned, there is no such thing as white privilege? It doesn't exist?
No, there's white privilege. There's all kinds of privilege. There's a reluctance to go back to the racialization of all of these issues. I mean, we do have an African-American president in this country. After a while, the race card has been played so much that it has lost its value.
The election of Barack Obama distorted the debate on discrimination. For many white people, he marked the end of America's conversation on race. For black people, his success actually marked the beginning. And these are some of those for whom the so-called race card has been played out. White, working-class males flocking to Donald Trump.
We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
Any discussion of white privilege must account for the problems of the poor and working class. But few would argue it's easier to be poor and white in America than poor and black.
White privilege, I just don't see it. You know what you need?
White privilege glasses. Helps you see the world the way we do.
There's a growing awareness of how corrosive white privilege can be. This video caused a storm online and was produced under the direction of Alice Hunt and her team. Put those on. Okay, so what do you see then?
I see confusion and disruption in my normal way of looking at the world. And that's what we intended to do with these glasses. We wanted to encourage people to start thinking about what it might be like to be in someone else's shoes.
My journey into the mind of white America has been an eye-opener. I can now better understand how some people can blithely be unaware of the racism around them, be able to push it to one side, push the chaos to the backs of their minds. But is that an excuse for society not doing anything? No.
Well, you saw in that film Clive talking about the white working class and their attraction to Donald Trump. He's unseated the elite Republican Party establishment and continues to shock them, even with his response to the Orlando shootings. In a moment, I'll be speaking to one of Trump's potential running mates. But first, a look at how America's changing demographics might explain his rise. Here's George W. Bush's former speechwriter, David Frum.
Donald Trump broke from Republican orthodoxy in a whole series of ways, not just because he was much more emphatic on the subject of migration than any other Republican before, but also because he was willing to defend the social insurance state. There are millions and millions of Americans of European descent in the middle of the country who feel that things are worse for them, and they're not wrong about that. And they sense that the party that they look to as their political protector is not really on their side. In a speech in 1998, Bill Clinton said the United States was living through the most rapid demographic transition in the history of the world. And since 1998, it has only sped up. This change in demographics has remade American politics, period. After the defeat in 2012, the Republican Party coalesced around a plan to liberalize immigration and legalize illegals in the United States. That was famously known as the Gang of Eight plan, after the 8 senators, Democratic and Republican, who came together to work on it. It was like Woody Allen's joke about the restaurant that tried to make up for bad food by making the portions bigger. Here's an even bigger helping of what you don't like. Now Donald Trump is running into a problem, which is that the very strategy that helped him lock up those white voters who don't have university educations is endangering his appeal to white voters who do have university educations, especially women. The Donald Trump people point out he's doing very, very well with the white vote. And then they look yearningly back at the past and say, if only we had the same electorate as we did a generation ago, then this share of the white vote would be enough to make him president. But what they don't understand is that a generation ago, his issues would not have worked, that the white vote would have been more divided, because this kind of appeal to white consciousness that Trump is making is only effective because of the very demographic transition that makes the appeal to white consciousness a doomed political strategy.
Well, Jan Brewer is the former governor of Arizona who's passed what's deemed to be the strictest bill on illegal immigrants the country has seen pre-Trump. Last month, he hinted he might make her his vice president. She joins me now from Arizona. Governor Brewer, thank you very much indeed for joining us. During your time in office, you took immigration very seriously. You attempted the nearest thing that America has seen to a wall, in essence, to keep Mexicans out. Talk us through that.
Well, we do have, along the border between here and Mexico, we do have some fencing, but Arizona is not enforced. We need better fencing. We need better we need more boots on the ground. We need technology down there, because Arizona has become the pathway for all the illegal immigration, including the drug cartels coming in from Mexico and South America.
So when Donald Trump talks about building a wall or getting Mexicans to build a wall, it sounds to you like a feasible idea?
I think that it is possible. We are a country, and a country without borders is like a house without walls. It collapses.
I want to talk more broadly about immigration, because after the Orlando shooting, we saw that Donald Trump's immediate response to what was effectively domestic terror was to clamp down on immigrants. He repeated his call to ban all Muslims temporarily and to ban all those from countries with terrorism ties. Many Republicans were shocked by that. Were you?
Well, I believe that Mr. Trump has taken this issue by the horns, and he's going to do what it is that is necessary to ensure the safety of the people of America.
If American Muslims hear this as a rejection of them or their religion or their way of life and associate that with the Republican Party, are you happy?
It's not against the Muslim religion. It's against the radical Islamic terrorists. They've been radicalized. It's not the Muslims. We have lots of Muslims that live in Arizona and throughout America, but we know that we have been identified, certainly, as the infidels, and their mission is to kill us.
President Obama says that's exactly the kind of talk that will radicalize young American Muslims towards the kind of terrorism that you're trying to prevent. They feel isolated, they feel disenfranchised, and they feel rejected by the mainstream.
Well, I happen to disagree with President Obama. I think that you need to call it what it is, and it's radical Islamic terrorism. And we are not going to allow the people of Arizona, the people of America, to live in fear. We need to fight fire with fire.
You share a lot of Donald Trump's views, and he's tipped you recently as a potential vice president. What kind of VP would you be to Trump? Would you like that role?
Well, I have not spoken with Mr. Trump in regards to being vice president of the United States. I indicated that, I certainly would be honored to serve Mr. Trump in any capacity that I could serve him in.
What happens if the established Republican Party decide to put forward their own candidate come the convention?
Well, I believe that will not happen. If it does, I think it will totally destroy the Republican Party, and the people that have supported him will leave the party.
What about gun control? After Orlando, many Americans were looking at the ease with which somebody who's been investigated by the FBI 3 times could walk into a club and injure or kill 100 people. Arizona has the least restrictive gun control of virtually any state in the US. Are you happy with the way things stand?
The background checks that were ran on these people that committed these horrific crimes cleared the background checks. For whatever reason, they were taken off the list, because we know that it is not perfect, but there has to be a solution. But I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Governor Brewer, thank you very much. When you win a Nobel Prize less than a year into office, the potential to disappoint is naturally huge. Barack Obama came signed, sealed and delivered with huge expectation on his shoulders. His foreign policy talk was about new beginnings and cooperation. The wars were done. Nearly 8 years on, we've asked a former State Department official, Karen von Hippel, to assess his legacy.
At the start of the Obama administration, expectations were very high, not just in the United States, but of course globally. Here was a man who was elected because he opposed what most considered an unjust war in Iraq. He soon won the Nobel Peace Prize. He gave his speech in Cairo, which was incredibly moving and affected millions around the world.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world.
On the success side of the ledger, opening of relations with Cuba is an obvious success. The Iran nuclear deal is another success. And of course, killing Osama bin Laden was a success. On the negative side of the ledger, I would put the chaos in Libya today, the inability to close Guantanamo as he had promised at the start, and of course, the continuing tragedy in Syria.
A red line for us is we start seeing a whole bunch of chemical weapons moving around or being utilized.
After the Assad regime crossed the red line by using chemical weapons against their own people, I do believe Obama could have used force to better effect. Obama's overall legacy will be mixed. He's cautious. He did not want to get into any unnecessary wars.
Karen von Hippel, well, non-intervention makes plenty of sense until it starts to seem like weakness, and that balance is, of course, a fine one. Chuck Hagel, a former Republican senator, was appointed Defense Secretary by President Obama. Over his 2 years, he saw massive upheaval in the Middle East, especially Syria, an issue that eventually saw him resign. He joins us now. Chuck Hagel, thank you very much indeed for your time on This Week's World. Syria and the Syria vote was a turning point for you and for many. Obama vetoed your plans to intervene there. Do you see that as the right move?
Well, it wasn't just a veto. The president had agreed to go forward and take some action in Syria to fulfill the president's own commitment if Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. The United Nations found very clearly that he had used chemical weapons more than once, and there was no question about that. And not to go forward and make good on a commitment, I think was the wrong decision. But I do think it hurt the president's credibility, certainly in the Middle East. When a president of the United States speaks and when a president says something, people in the world listen. And not only do our allies listen, but our adversaries listen.
And when you say it hurt his credibility, do you think it has recovered since that point?
Well, I think it's hard to recover trust and credibility ever. This was not just a casual, flippant comment, but it did mean something. And I think especially the leaders of the Middle East had some confidence in the president's word that there would be something done about the use of chemical weapons.
What do you think would have happened in Syria now if you had gone in?
Well, we are there, actually. We are in Syria in different kinds of operations, special forces operations. We've been using airstrikes along with allies for almost 2 years now. So we're clearly in Syria. But to your bigger question, was the question about whether Russia would have gotten involved militarily if a different decision would have been made. I don't know that, and I think history will have to play that out.
Secretary, just stay there for one moment. Chuck Hagel became Washington's main conduit to Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the military general who overthrew the first ever democratically elected Egyptian president. Recently, the appalling brutality inflicted on an Italian student tortured to death in Cairo turned the world's focus on Egypt once again. Secretary Hagel, just have a look at our film.
لماذا تم اعتقالي بهذه الطريقة؟ لماذا تم إخفائي قسرياً؟ لماذا تم تعذيبي؟ لا يوجد هناك إجابة لهذه اللماذا الكثيرة سوى تلك الكلمة التي قالها لي أحد رفاق الزنزانة يوماً: علشان أنت مصري وعايش في مصر يا ابني. يوم 24 مايو 2015 قوات الأمن اقتحمت البيت بتاعنا. فوجئت بباب الأوضة بيتكسر وعدد كبير من أفراد الأمن داخلين معهم رشاشات وملثمين. طبعا اتخضيت من المنظر جدا، فأول ما صحيت من النوم حطيت إيدي قدام وشي، مفيش حد يضرب مفيش حد يضرب. من بداية وصولي لهناك شدوني من شعري، رموني في الأرض ودخلوني زنزانة. كانت عينيا متغمية، كانت الريحة صعبة جدا. بعد كده واحد بدأ يتحرك وجاي ناحيتي يهددني: انت ممكن تطلع من هنا مقتول. ابتدى يقول لي ان والدك واخوك موجودين عندنا هنا وهم موجودين لحد ما انت تعترف. ده جزء من يعني اسلوب من اساليب الامن الوطني، ان هم يعتقلوا حد من الاسره علشان يهددوا الشخص المعتقل. قالوا لي: انت هتروح دلوقتي، ما تتكلمش مع صحافه، ما تتواصلش مع حد، ووالدك واخوك هيفضلوا موجودين لحد ما نتاكد ان انت ما اتكلمتش مع حد. من 22 يوم مفيش اي معلومات اطلاقا، مش عارفين هو اذا كان عايش ولا ميت. كان وقتها طبعا كلام كتير بيتقال انه اسالوا في المشرحه. انا ما عرفتش ارد عليه، يعني هو اول ما قال لي: ازيك يا نور عامل ايه، انا لقيت نفسي بعيط، مش عارف اقول له ايه. افتكروه شخص تاني، عذبوه فترة، بعد كده عرفوا ان هو مش الشخص التاني ده. كان اسلام مر على اختفائه قسريا شهرين. رحنا له تاني يوم زيارة عشان نشوفه. عديت من جنبه، مخدتش بالي ان هو معرفتوش. كان شعره طويل، دقنه طويلة، نفس اللبس اللي هو اتقبض عليه بيه من 122 يوم. ريحة اللبس بتاعته كانت صعبة جدا، على رقبته من هنا آثار تعذيب. طول ال 122 يوم كانت عينيه متغمية، كانت ايديه مربوطة ورا ظهره، بيربطوا ايده بيربطوا رجله، بيعلقوه في السقف من ايده ورجله. فضل متعلق من ايده في مرة 4 أيام كاملين بدون أكل بدون شرب لحد ما أغمى عليه. هو اسلام بيحكي ان لازغلي ده مقبره حتى لو الشخص خرج منه حي فروحه اتقتلت. لا تنسوا من زالوا قيد الاختفاء القسري، ولا تنسوا الآلاف مثلي في السجن يدفعون ثمن الحرية من زهرة عمرهم.
Chuck Hagel, the Interior Ministry has called this a smear campaign, but I wonder how America feels, the moral standpoint, when you are still giving financial military aid to Egypt in billions.
We roundly, fully, completely criticized and condemned that action. That was very, very, very clear. We did, by the way, stop all military sales and all equipment. The United States is still supporting some of the previous commitments that we have made over the years to Egypt. If we cut off everything, then what options does that give us to make some attempt, some effort on the inside, working with that government to try to make it better for the people? The human rights violations are terrible. We've said that. We've been clear about that.
I want to look forward now. Turbulent political times. As a former Republican senator, do you lean these days towards the Republicans or the Democrats?
Well, as a former Republican senator, I don't know what my party that I started out is today. I don't know what the Republican Party is. It is not the party that I started with. It's not the party of Eisenhower and Reagan and Bush Sr. And others. What will come out of this election, I don't know. But I do think one thing is rather clear, certainly about the Republican Party. The Republican Party is in the process of this churn, and a different kind of party will emerge over the next 4 years.
Chuck Hagel, thank you. Now, how do you deal with crime? How about just paying the criminals not to reoffend? We told you these could be left field. Here's this week's Think Again.
I think about who these young men are, and I think they've got to be involved rather than get this young man a job. Quite frankly, they're not ready for a job. And when you dig a little deeper, what you learn is they don't even want a job. They want money. The way that it works is that after 6 months of their 18-month fellowship, they become eligible to receive this cash stipend. What does that do? It translates into a 75% reduction in firearm-related murder. This is about keeping young men alive. This is about stopping shootings. The city is much safer. Everything else we've tried has not been successful. We're spending $400,000 every time a person was shot. $400,000 for every young man that is shot. $9,000 for every young man who decides to stop. You do the math.
I'll let you ponder that one for a moment. Now, a lot hangs in the balance this week for the UK and indeed for Europe, with the imminent referendum on our membership of the EU. Last week, Sweden's Foreign Secretary told me the union would start to unravel if we left. We'll hear in a moment from a Brexiteer who believes it could actually make Europe stronger. But first, I asked the former NATO Secretary-General and former Prime Minister of Denmark what he thought Brexit would mean to European security.
In the worst case, there is a clear risk that this would unravel the European Union and we would revert to a renationalization of policies in Europe. We would revert to a situation before we started the European project, which eventually became the European Union.
Does the prospect of Brexit, do you believe, leave NATO more or less vulnerable to Putin's ambitions in a former Soviet space?
There is no doubt that if the UK were to leave the European Union, it would be strongly applauded in the Kremlin, because the Russians and possible other aggressors would consider it a weakening of the Western community as such. I fully respect that this is a decision of the people in the UK. But seen from abroad, seen from the perspective of a former Prime Minister of a small European country, Denmark, and a former NATO Secretary General, I would call Brexit completely irresponsible.
And if the response to that was, we don't really mind if the EU breaks up, there is no great love for that institution anymore, what would you respond?
My clear response would be you should look at the interests of the UK when you vote, and it is in the interest of the UK to maintain a European integration, to keep European countries on the path we pursued after the Second World War. And I do believe it's in the interest of the UK to stay within the EU economically, because you are dependent on trade with the European Union, politically because you should have a seat at the table where decisions are made, and finally also because of peace in Europe.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen, will Europe really turn its back on the UK if we vote to leave? Crispin Blunt is chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and he's been listening to that interview. Let's address some of the points there, Crispin Blunt. Weakening of the Western alliance, that was a point that a former head of NATO made.
There were some elements missing in that presentation. What I would say is that we sit half in and half out of the European Union, not really committed to the whole institution. And actually the effect is, to mean our European partners can't get on with the necessary integration to make the thing work, and we're left with a permanently defensive position in the world, stopping them doing what they want to do. The ironic effect of the UK leaving will actually be to make the creation of a European defence identity much more likely.
Spell that out. Are you talking about an EU army?
And if that's the direction of travel that our partners would like to go on, it's the policy of Germany and Spain to go in that direction. It's obviously with the desire of the Commission to create this capability, and it's one of the points of abuse sometimes put out by colleagues on the Leave campaign, saying you will be checking in for Euro Army if the United Kingdom remains.
There's a lot of assumptions there about what Europe would do without us, but bluntly, Rasmussen has said it is irresponsible for the UK to vote for Brexit.
Well, I don't think he's thought the implications through. We've got to address in Europe the necessity for some kind of integration to make the Eurozone work and proper democratic accountability. And they're going to have to address these issues to make the EU an effective, more integrated institution. And frankly, our position doesn't help.
Thank you very much. Well, that brings us to the end of our current series. Don't worry, we'll be selling off the orange lamps to the highest bidder, but we'll see you next time round, and thanks for being with us. Goodbye.